Give me a sec.
Okay, we're on air going once, three times we're on air. So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good part of day, depending where you are in the world. Welcome everyone to the largest, fastest growing, and the most active, now being global for a while, large scale Scrum community, originated in New York, going global. Today we have a very special guest. I would like to introduce him. His name is Dave West. He's the CEO and the product owner of Scrum.org, the Ken Schwaber's company, for those that may not remember or may not know, one of the co-creators of Scrum. I will come back to the dual responsibility of Dave just in a second because I want to make a point of it. But before that, I'll just say a few more words about Dave. He's very passionate about the future of work and how to build organizations that are um, dynamic and unlock the potential for everyone in the complex world we live in. Dave is a frequent keynote speaker and a widely published author. His books include the Nexus framework for scaling Scrum. And by the way, as a side note, we had some very interesting discussions about Nexus and large-scale Scrum being very consistent in messaging they send to people, as opposed to some other commercially successful frameworks. And he's also had first-oriented, object-oriented analysis and design. Prior to joining Scrum.org, Dave was the chief product owner at Tasktop, the company, where he was responsible for product management, engineering, and architecture. And I do want to say something else about his dual role at Scrum.org. Being a CEO, which is a pretty highly elevated role, and the product owner is probably what we miss at many organizations when we implement either one team basic Scrum or its scale versions such as Nexus or less. This is super critical, super valuable, and super important to have a person who is properly positioned organizationally, strategically, economically, and who carries this important role, the role of a PO. So being a CEO and a PO actually is a great mix. In fact, I think it was Ken Schwaber back in the days who said once, consider treating your PO as a mini CEO if you have a very large company. So something I wanted to plug in, Dave. And today's session is more of a Q&A for Dave. We have some specific questions we would like to pose to Dave, and there's going to be an open dialogue at some point. So we're going to start with the few that we have prepared, and then we'll just roll with the punches. Okay.
Sounds good.
You're good with you, Dave, right? So I have one question I would like to throw at you, and please share your knowledge, your expertise, your experience, whatever applies. This is on minds of many, especially if we work for large organizations where HR, human resource, as instance, for traditionally HR norms and policies exist. In your opinion, in your view, do HR norms and policies predominantly today, do they support or impede organizational adaptiveness? Adaptiveness, aka agility. Those are two synonymous words. In your view, do HR norms and policies help us as agilists, as adaptivists, as organizational change agents, or do they create obstacles for us? Please let us know. What do you think?
So first, hi, everybody. Thank you for taking your Friday lunch to listen to some geezer out in Boston talk about his perspective. Many of you know much more than I do, so it's always a little embarrassing. I always feel a little bit of imposter syndrome in these events. But thank you for inviting me, and thank you, Gene, for organizing it with people that have just suffered an earthquake. Thank you for doing that in spite of all the things around you. So HR, interesting. The norms and policies. Ultimately, my experience has been, if I had to just respond instantly to that question, I would say impede mostly. But there's a lot more about that, I think. And ultimately, HR was developed to support a different system than many of us encourage. A system that optimized, people, resources, a system that uh, ensured that we weren't going to get sued, particularly in the United States, where that seems to be a thing. A system that ultimately protected the organization from the peril of the people that worked within it. And that has changed for lots of reasons. That the systems that we're encouraging, the organizational constructs, the ideas, obviously I'm a big fan of Scrum, encourage a different way of working, which ultimately can be at odds with the things that HR holds so dear. But the question I always have, so I was recently at a large consumer packaged goods organization that just made me sign a really big NDA, so I can't say. Actually, I'm meeting them after this call, and I was talking to them about product ownership and the role of product. And there was a HR person on the call, and we were talking about, and she kept saying, but what's their job title? What's their career path? How does it fit into our family of jobs? And there was this tension that existed. And so we went round and round in circles, and I asked a question that I think many of you ask is, how are you measured? Not the organization, but you. How is HR measured in your organization? Is it measured on cost? Is it productivity, whatever that means? Is it cost to hire, employee satisfaction? And we had quite an interesting conversation about how she was measured, and then hers. What she was really focused on was structure, control, stability, hiring pipelines, that to keep the system going. And she didn't really, it's not that she didn't care, but that's not what she was measured, was outcomes and value and delivering in innovation in an organization that's hundreds of thousands of people throughout the entire world, delivering many of the products that we put under our armpits and shaved and, today. And so if you get a HR organization that's aligned to the same outcomes that ultimately you are, and that agility is, and this model perpetuates, then I think HR can be a huge advocate. And I've seen that. A friend of mine, he's become a friend. He's a COO of Dino Therapeutics that does machine learning and genetic research, so CRISPR technology. What could possibly go wrong? I do think he's creating King Kong or Godzilla in his backyard, but we'll see. And luckily, he was very early on in their organization, and they've built an organization from the bottom up that has a singular purpose and a very clear mandate, and everything conforms and delivers on that. And that makes, and their huge HR people, as it's called there, talent, no, people, I think is what it's called there, are an incredible advocate. Obviously, there's classic challenges around incentives, reviews, hiring policies, blooming job descriptions. We live in a world, I mean, we're just having this at the moment with product owner versus product manager. Is that, obviously product owner's rubbish because of what SAFe has done to it, and we hate it. The product community, people like Marty Kagan and Melissa Perry go on because it's, but hang on, what does that mean? Every organization interprets those things very differently. Job titles are an interesting challenge, which is something that's perpetuated and encouraged and enacted and enforced through HR organizations. Oh, I can't do that. I'm a software engineer. What do you mean you can't? It's not on my job description. I don't go and talk to customers. That's the very worst version of it. But ultimately, I think that if you can ensure that everybody's aligned to the same set of measures, outcomes, where everybody can see the destination that we're all going, then people or HR or whatever it's called can be a huge advocate and supporter for you in any organization. But for the majority, I feel that they do impede agility. I don't know. I'm not sure, Gene, if that made sense, or anybody, if that's what you feel.
Dave, thank you very much. So by the way, I will be, since we got five major questions, I'll time box this. I'll time box a little bit.
Good point. Yeah.
We're very good so far. We're doing good on time. I'll take the first stab at this, and maybe someone else will ask follow-up questions. You did mention something that's actually pretty pretty interesting. Like specifically with job titles and creating what's called a false dichotomy, and antagonizing one role against the other, whereas it's almost natural to have one role becoming a great candidate for that role, like a product manager could be, it's a traditional role, externally facing, could be an amazing candidate for becoming a product owner.
Yeah.
It's properly positioned. But you mentioned Mr. Kagan's advocacies out there. What do you like? Let's just take this specific example. And by the way, I don't want to digress into what I've seen being produced from that corner of the universe. What's that false dichotomy to you? Like, oh, if you're a product manager, you're not a product owner, and vice versa. You can be both. What's your take on that? Because
I think,
HR
yeah.
of an average organization will blindly and sometimes naively catch on to this, uh, idea and just will run with it. So please.
I think product owner versus product manager is a false dichotomy, a false problem. I think ultimately it so I'm not going to talk about I'll talk about Marty's stuff in a minute, but ultimately it's about what is the responsibilities and accountabilities of this human being in pursuit of the value that this product creates. I mean, in many product organizations, product managers have no ownership of the product. They really are managing it, meaning dealing with multiple stakeholders, getting consensus, getting votes, et cetera, et cetera. They are not mini CEOs. They do not own the product. And I've seen product owners in exactly the same situation. Obviously, SAFe perpetuates that with the distinction between product manager and product owner, which I think is an incorrect decision necessary for scaling. I don't personally hold any grudges against SAFe. Dean Leffingwell is the reason why I live in America. So you can judge that what you will. He used to be in the office next to me when I was the RUP product manager, and he's a fantastic chap. But that distinction, that okay, somebody's deciding the vision, doing the stuff, and then somebody makes sure that a team delivers it, is just wholly wrong, and Marty continues that false narrative around product ownership with the fact that they're backlog managers. Yes, they do manage a backlog, but a backlog is a fantastically important artifact for ensuring that teams are working on the right thing and there's some sort of plan. So I don't see that being a disconnect. But if in an organization that has two job titles, product owner and product manager, I often just ask them about what the accountabilities are. And I encourage them to sort of resolve that into one, if at all possible, in terms of a job title, because I think it just makes the most sense. And then when they say, well, it's too much for one human being, and then you say, well, there's great teams around them that can help them. And that's the whole point. The other thing I don't like, I really like a lot of things that Marty Kagan says in his new book, Transformed. The one thing I don't like is the hierarchy that he encourages and the disempowerment of development teams, as we used to call them, Scrum teams now. Sorry, old Scrum guy. I think that the fact that all the decisions are made by this triad of UX, leads engineer, and product manager is just awful. I would hope that the product owner, product manager sets direction, clearly defined direction, goals that's measurable, enables and then empowers the team to actually execute on that. There's so much creative potential, and I think that's the reason why we love Less. That's the reason why we love Scrum. There's so much creative potential in teams, and any emphasis on hierarchy, even from a scaling point of view, destroys that, in my opinion, or discourages it. I know choices have to be made. I accept that nothing's perfect, but the best people to be creative about the work are the people that are doing the bloody work. And that helped, supported, yes, but that is at the heart. So I think it's a false dichotomy or a false disconnect. I think we should encourage those two worlds to come together. I think every situation is different. If you want to call these people product owners, do it. If you want to call them product managers, do it. Don't care. Make sure that they are taking advantage of product ownership and product management bodies of work and bringing that all together to help those teams be successful. I don't know, long rambling answer, probably
No,
Gene.
no,
So
no. It was very good, and thank you for explaining what you thought. I mean, with this false dichotomy, the manager versus the product manager versus product owner. Another one could be discussed: feature teams versus product teams. Well, let's not go there. This is, I mean, unless we still want to do this. On this specific topic, on the question of HR norms and policies, folks, does anyone have any questions? Um, Specifically for Dave, maybe you want to put something on the table, coming from your own experience. How did it impact your job, your role? Did it support or did it not support your company's HR norms and policies?
I was going to start on something else there, better not.
Sure.
Let's create some space for other people to ask questions if there is about this topic.
I have a question, Dave. So, Dave, I think probably many of us will agree with your assessment that HR mostly impedes adaptability or agility. Given that, what are the things that you would suggest that we as Agilists, Agile coaches, Scrum Masters, change agents do to change the situation?
Gosh, that's a $64,000 question, right? Or probably worth a lot more. Remember when $64,000 was a lot of money? Anyway, sorry. Anyway, so my experience is it's really hard. This is incredibly challenging, and you do it the usual way, unfortunately. So there's going to be no surprises to my answer. You identify how they're measured, you understand their incentives, their motivation, their status, their authority. You do that, you build that systems view, that holistic view of their relationship with the things that you're worried about and the dependencies. And you identify the things that they're incentivized. And then you work with their boss to hopefully change some of those things or accept that they're incompatible and the challenges, and then you do that sort of continuous process of this is the reason why it hasn't worked. So a great example is Fidelity Investments were the second company ever to do Scrum, right? I mean, it's in the Scrum guide. Everybody's aware of this. Scrum was adopted to introduce their Peter Lynch, I think, was the CEO at that point, wanted an online trading system, then got one. The project was a disaster. In comes Ken with his object-orientedness and his Scrumness, and they bring in Scrum, and it's incredibly successful. Incredible. They delivered, and successful on two counts. It also paid for Ken's daughter to go to Harvard. So it was a win-win all round. That's how Ken describes it. Customer happy, Ken very happy, daughter happy, going to Harvard, everybody's happy. Harvard's probably happy as well. Now, it took them a long time, and to some extent, you could argue whether they've really done it now, but it took them a long time to really effectively drive agility into the organization, primarily because the review process, the incentives, that big bonus that financial services pay, was all tied to a different process to the way in which work was needed to be done using Scrum. The status authority, the controls were all misaligned. And so one thing that I really love about the LESS community and is this holistic systems thinking approach, which really can help. By identifying that and making them very visible, you can really, you can't necessarily change them. There's only so much power one has. But what you can do is make them transparent, that disconnect. And when you make things transparent, then with luck and a few lunchtime beers and maybe the odd hey, you get everybody to make changes and start to move in the right direction, or at the very least say, told you so. Look, there's a diagram that shows it. And I think making things transparent, but that means you have to understand it, you know, do a go see, do those sort of things to actually understand, and also talk to these people. And they're incredibly smart. Though I must admit, I was persuaded by my COO, Eric, to go to a HR conference. I've never been to a HR conference. I was expecting it was going to be like future of work, AI assistants, you know, all sorts of really cool, funky. It really wasn't. It was a little bit disappointing. And I feel that they themselves feel a little bit like trapped by the system and the man, and they're doing their best. But generally, as human beings, every HR person I've ever spoke to is incredibly nice and wanting to change. So I guess understand their processes, understand their systems, understand their incentives, understand what's important to them, understand who their boss is, make things transparent, and then see what happens.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dave. Thank you for this. Well, how about we pick another question in the same vein, and probably you will even merit it too if you would like. So the next question we had prepared was, what do you think, Dave, in today's day and age, the majority of organizations we work with, is budgeting, the traditional budgeting, is it supportive? Does it support adaptive product development? The way we fund our work, the way we finance it, is it supportive? And if not, then
yes, no is a short answer. It's an absolute disaster in every organization and even everybody accepts that it's a disaster. That's the other thing that's so ironic. So I was in Geneva in January, which sounds exotic. It really wasn't. It rained the entire time, though the food's really good in Geneva. Best place to eat food in Switzerland, in my opinion. Beautiful French cuisine. Anyway, but so I was in Geneva and I met this English guy, actually. He runs a significant large another consumer packaged goods organization, and he runs the different one, and he runs the supply chain technology, etc. And we were chatting, and he's English, so we did the whole how's it going, mate, you know, sort of thing, bald as well. So there was a lot in common, and we chatted, even though he's very senior, and we were chatting, and we started talking about planning and budgeting. And he looked at me, his face was gaunt. He goes, "You have no idea." I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Our budgeting process is a continuous 3-year rolling budget plan system that ultimately requires 50 people to be full-time working on budgeting and planning in my organization that do nothing else." It's like, whoa. And he hated it. He said it was just awful. You know, he just sort of highlighted the incredible disconnect. So I think even my friend Tyson at Dino Therapeutics, one of the biggest challenges he's had as their organization has grown incredibly successfully is that as they're brought in finance controller types, they want to exert these models that have worked incredibly well in the previous age, incredibly well, and they don't necessarily fit. Also, the other thing that I've seen, which is really, really incredibly worrying, is a lot of people's status, authority, or position is determined by their position in this budgeting process. So you've got all these people who don't want to get rid of the process, even though they know the process isn't working, because their status and authority and power is connected to the process, which they know isn't working, but that's not the point. And so you've got this like perpetuating problem. Yeah, and just it doesn't add any value, because then the work starts, and guess what? All of that stuff's kind of ignored, or there's some level of pantomime done, process pantomime, so that we get things reported in the same way, even though it's actually not what's going on. Because we all know that when we're doing the work, assuming we want to get it right, and it isn't a big government contract, we do what's needed. We don't do what we thought we needed, 100 years ago, or whenever we started the process. So, and the other thing, so I think modern budgeting processes, like beyond budgeting, those awesome stuff, ideas are so much simpler, are so much easier. And if you move to a product operating model, you know, what people like Marty talk about, what you end up with is an even easier model where basically you invest in products and then those products decide what's going to happen. Initiatives cross products, yes, agreed. Those initiatives are managed in that, you know, in some manner, where it's strategically or value based, so the product teams can then respond to that particular initiative. And then it sort of goes, it's just so simple. And then they do the right work and they deliver the right stuff. And if you've made investment decisions incorrectly, it's very clear very quickly. If that team, that product, those teams or that product needs more investment, you're like, oh, didn't realize our competitor was going to do this. Then you increase that investment, managing all the constraints that increasing teams and doing more stuff has, and managing the pain that's associated with that. You make a choice. But if you understand your portfolio in terms of the products that are supporting it, then the investment model is so easy, instead of this incredibly complicated project approach that most of us have got in our organizations. We can simplify it massively. But again, like the HR situation, the connection to people's position and authority is such that many people don't want to change that. And when finance is involved, they're sort of like, it's like, you know, the Spanish Inquisition. You don't want to mess with those, right? It's just, it becomes incredibly challenging. But I still think that you can massively simplify planning and investment and budgeting in a product-led organization.
Thank you, Dave. Very good. Very good, folks. The floor is open. Actually, this is an open forum. If you would like to throw a question at Dave or chime in, again, budgeting, funding, what's being funded, what's being budgeted at your company that makes your work doable or undoable, and how do you try to influence it? Anyone?
I understand not wanting to talk about it. It's so painful, isn't it?
Well, we chose those, I call them Al Capone's questions, untouchables. Remember that? You know,
Yes, I do remember. Great movie. I haven't seen that in a long time.
We don't go there. That's something we don't talk about here.
Wasn't Sean Connery in it? I mean,
no, not Sean Connery.
no, wasn't he in The Untouchables?
Well, I mean,
Anyway,
depends which one. The series.
The movie with anyway, but anyway.
Yes, Sean was in the movie. I'm talking.
He was the cop, the sergeant, right? Gets killed.
Elliot Ness. Elliot Ness was the search.
Yeah, and that was Kevin Costner, I think, as I recall.
Right.
But anyway,
yeah,
so
yes, yeah,
it is a great movie. I mean, budgeting. I in a similar way to HR, I think the only way we can encourage change, I don't think we can drive the change. I think we can encourage it, create an environment for it, is by making things very transparent, showing the disconnects, and then encouraging the organization to take advantage of the amazing opportunities that we have with these amazing teams aligned clearly to customer outcomes, working empowered, inspired, motivated. If we can just do that, then the world will be a better place for both HR and finance.
Thanks, Dave. Folks, anyone wants to chime in?
I'm chiming. So, Dave, thanks so much. What facilitation techniques have you found are most helpful in bringing together, these groups that have opposing views on how to move forward? I mean, like working agreements. Have you found working agreement? No. So what have you found? What
I found goals bring people together. I find that so my experience of watching a lot of these things sort of play out. So I'm no expert. You're probably much more capable of bringing these groups together than I, and I tend to just sit in these things and watch. You know, I'm sort of like the David Attenborough of Agile sometimes. You know, I'm watching those sort of animals without the great voice, unfortunately. But I'm watching these animals fight in the Serengeti or whatever. And and what I have seen work is to everybody get on board with respect to a goal and shared goals. And that actually is a lot more challenging than it should be. But if you can get everybody to accept, the great thing about Dino Therapeutics, just use that example, was that they use goals as a mechanism to bring everybody together. And when people don't agree goals, that's obviously super important as well. So goals can bring these people together very quickly. And some of that is actually, obviously there's mechanisms that can highlight the disconnects between the incentives and the goals of the teams very quickly. And I find it's better to get that out in the open earlier. Working agreements, yeah, very important, but they tend to get a bit huggy feely, and many of these people in these departments don't like that as much. So in finance in particular, so goals very important, shared goals, clear vision on that. And also I saw this at a large consumer packaged goods company here, that bringing in those executives that ultimately that everybody knows is the boss, and getting that person out. We were actually, it's a case study that we all know. So the latest exfoliating Gillette razor, the exfoliating razor, was built using Scrum. And one of the most important challenges that they had actually was a finance element. It was about price and cost. And the finance department were and this is R&D, were continuously, because they do a very detailed analysis of costing, and they were like, no, this is what it, and it was causing all sorts of trouble in the project. And what they ended up doing is bringing everybody together, making this very transparency at a sprint review. The CEO from Gillette was at a sprint review. I mean, that's unheard of, right? And he literally sat there and said, they made these assumptions, and he goes, oh, no. I don't care about that. I just said that because there was this finance edict about the price, the unit pricing of the cartridges, that ultimately he threw away and said, no, we should need to do it right. And what happened there? Spotlight. I don't know.
I did it. I did it.
Did you? Oh, I was removing it because I don't really like. Oh, sorry. But yeah, so getting that transparency, making sure it was a clear goal. He said, no, that wasn't a goal. Let's reassess the goals, and then it brought these teams together. So that's what I've found. I haven't found, working agreements or liberating structures or all this stuff to be particularly useful. What I have found is, as soon as you get clarity of goals, then the other things become valuable to facilitate that conversation. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah, I want to ask, who got the CEO in the room?
Actually, the guy that I'm meeting next in my next meeting, another English guy. He this was it. So a razor company getting there, every 3 to 5 years they release a new razor, right? They were way behind. So suddenly everybody was like, okay, we need to get this working. And he ensured that the right stakeholders were he was sort of he was the product owner, though he doesn't like to admit it, were at that review. And he said, look, he saw this was happening, and he got that CEO. And interestingly, I think he may have prepped him a little bit so that he was very, no. Yeah. So this guy, another guy called David, actually an English guy called David, got that CEO. And product owner, this comes back to that accountability we talked about earlier. If you're a product manager, your job is to manage. If you're a product owner, your job is to deliver this thing, and you will do everything that you can to make that happen. And if that means burning some political capital to get a geezer in a meeting and prep them up front so that they do that, so that they're ready with that one very precise comment, you do it. One thing that disappoints me about our community is we've written 100 books about retrospectives, but we've written like 2 about sprint reviews.
Okay.
And I think that just sums up sometimes the reason why Scrum is not dying a death, but is less popular than it was. I think because we're so busy looking at ourselves rather than really building great outcomes for our customers. I think sometimes that gets in the way. Sorry, was that might have been a little bit political there for a second. Sorry.
Hey, Dave, I know we need to move on time. So Vicky, just
Oh.
to serve justice, you raised your hand and then you lowered it. If we can just do a quick check with you before we move on.
Yeah, sure. Hi.
Hello?
So can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's very interesting. You said the magic word, Dave, politics. And you cannot, I've not seen any success without being able to navigate the political arena. And you know, this is a very interesting conversation because we've touched on finance, we've touched on HR, we've touched on product ownership, and they all come to, and you talked about goals, right? Aligning on a goal. And the political maneuvering that it takes to align all of those things is something that we should be talking about, not as a, you know, and it needs to be front and center, I think. Because without that political acuity, essentially, we're not going to get to the results we want, right? Les talks a lot about exposing the dysfunction, and politics is always a dysfunction, essentially, right? Or it's an unspoken, generally dysfunction. And I just have not seen anyone be successful unless they navigate all of those elements.
100% agree. Status, power, authority, position, which is at the heart of any political environment, right? That you're always navigating those characteristics of the humans that are part of this system to ensure that you get optimal, wouldn't say perfect, but optimal outcome around it. And it's a huge thing. I 100% agree. And I would say that, you know, that many times we're talking about scaling next, we may have time to, when we look at scaling, what undermines every single enterprise adoption of agility or scaling or agile transformation is not Scrum or less, or even, dare I say, safe. I know that on this group, it isn't that really. I mean, yes, you could have done it better. Yes, you could have, but it is ultimately that element that we as many of us come from software engineering backgrounds, systems backgrounds. We're so focused on that, we forget that ultimately that this is, when you get 3 people in a room, you've got to navigate politics. If you get 6, you've got to navigate even more. If you get 100, then you have to navigate more. If you get 1,000, you have to navigate. And it's a full-time job, and it's managing that is really, really challenging and incredibly hard. And I don't think it's like, so I was fortunate enough to go to lunch with Peter Cotter and Ken. I drove and picked up the check. That was my contribution. And I listened to them waffling on about, talking very intelligently about change and that. And this is at the heart of change, right? You know, you have to, Peter Cotter said something really interesting. He was like, change only works when the people with the political power and influence are exerting that influence. When they leave, it often goes back to what it was. And he cited GE, right? And Cisco, that big case study that is part of one of his books. And I was like, well, it's really, really worrying. But unfortunately, that's what humans are. And it's just the reality. And we have to be very aware of it. We have to be always thinking about it. It has to be front and center in the way, and it feels like you're playing games, and it feels like you're not trusting people and all that. But that's not the point. Everybody comes from their own point of view, and there's no such thing as the truth, but its pursuit is honorable, right? And interesting. But yes, exactly. Sorry.
Thanks, Dave. So I'm gonna cheat now because we got only 12 minutes on the clock remaining, and so I'm gonna combine. I'm gonna concatenate the last two questions into one because they actually are related. So the last one was about the iron. I call it the iron constraint, the iron triangle, the iron constraint triangle of scaling, and the three corners are commercial tools, populistic frameworks, without dropping any specific names, and large consultancies that move it along oftentimes. But I would like to couple it with the previous question that I wanted to ask you. Is scaling a good or bad thing to begin with? I mean, is it conditional? For example, scaling versus just copy pasting what's in existence today, like maybe single team Scrum or quasi Scrum. Is it a good or bad thing? So I'm sorry for making this like a loaded question, but the rest
it's a huge one. I mean, so is scaling good or bad? To who, I think, is the question. If I'm a consulting firm and I've just closed $1 million scaling contract, it's good, whatever happens, right? The situation that I see, so what I'm seeing a lot is organizations like they adopt the Spotify model without really understanding what the Spotify model is. What they adopt SAFe without really, maybe they do understand, but and it's just an excuse because they had to be doing something, but not really understand what SAFe is. What ultimately, I think the only way that you change is yourself. And I think that meaning the organization itself is to take ownership of its desires and its needs. I also think that you need to build, I think the only effective way of driving change in an organization is one product at a time. Now, I appreciate that creates a lot of pain and a lot of friction and makes ultimately it hard, but one product group at a time, one value stream at a time. I think incremental change is the only way. I also think that organizations they do a waterfall approach to an agile or process change. How the heck can you do that? You can't. You have to use an agile approach because it's a massively complex problem. You have to be empirical. You have to test hypotheses. You have to understand outcomes. You have to have a clearly communicated goal. You have to be transparent in all the stuff we teach at the team level applies totally at the organizational level. And you need to apply it in that fashion. And also it takes time and there'll be mistakes, rockets will explode and go wrong sometimes. You'll try something, it won't work. You'll also try something and then it will work. And then 2 weeks later, it doesn't work. And you're like, why is that? Because things change, people change, situations change. And we need to push down ownership of process to teams. We need to create an environment that supports them in pursuit of their goals. And we need to ultimately ensure incentives, ensure finance, ensure support organizations. A great example is I was talking to an organization and they'd outsourced their infrastructure. And there was this team that needed to, deliver working software frequently. It was a software team. And it took them 2 weeks to get access to a VM now. They had to fill in forms. It was like ridiculous. And so, was the team empowered just to use a credit card and just go on AWS and just do it? Well, and that would be, if you had Elon Musk, I know he's not as cool as he once was, but Elon Musk, when I visited Tesla, one of the first things that I discovered was the fact is, if a team needed something and they couldn't get the organization to provide it, and if it was commercially available, go and do it. Just get it. Don't wait. Just get to do it. And yes, there are implications around that: security concerns, privacy concerns, issues. But if you want to highlight a problem, then just do it, because then suddenly it's like, well, hang on a minute. So, and that's an interesting thing. Now, so I honestly believe that scaling is probably, can work, very challenging, incredibly hard. Copy paste doesn't work, I don't believe. However, that doesn't mean we can't learn from all these frameworks. It doesn't mean we can't observe them. It doesn't mean we can't ask the questions of people that own them and take from that, build our own approach that's unique to ourselves to do what we're doing. I honestly believe that. There's a lot of the last 9 years I've run Scrum.org. There's always been our professional Scrum trainers, who are an awesome community, have always said, why don't we have a safe equivalent? And the reason why is because ultimately we can't have something that's exactly the same. It's going to be completely different. And I haven't got the sales or marketing budget to drive something to compete with safe at that level. Now, things might be changing now, and that's another story. But yeah, so I think you have to build your own in your own organization, learning from everybody else, but don't think that you can take Spotify and bring it in. Don't think you can take Safe and bring it in exactly right. There's a massive amount of uniqueness into your organization, and approach it as an agile situation, an agile opportunity, an agile project, incremental, transparency, clear goals, focused on removing impediments, creating an environment for success around them. Allow your teams to own their processes. Yeah, so I guess that's the first part. The second thing is the iron triangle. That's interesting, or the iron constraint triangle, scaling commercial tools, populist frameworks, large consultancies. Yeah, I don't really know how to answer that. Or even, so all of those things are definitely challenging, obviously. But they don't have to be constraining. Large consultancies are, they want to do the right thing, but you got to remember what their incentives are and what their focus is, and what they need to fill in timesheets, create statements of work, get big statements of work. Obviously, Safe is fantastic for that. That's what they want. They do want their customer to be successful, but they also have their own needs as well. Tools, I don't think, are ever a problem, and it's a misnomer when Jira isn't the reason why your Scrum implementation's failing. It's got nothing. It is a thing, and it's a pain in the ass sometimes, but that doesn't mean that. And then the frameworks themselves, well, and I'm probably guilty of this, not listening enough, not having the right materials. Yeah, maybe. There's things we could do that make it so much better, I'm sure. But ultimately, I think that at the heart of it is this fundamental challenge that you can't buy agility. You have to become it. You have to do it yourself. You can buy help to do it yourself, but it doesn't. I remember when I was working for Rational Software, we had a soccer team in England before I moved to America, and we'd play every year at the sales kickoff, European sales kickoff. We'd play Germany, France, Spain, and one year, we always lost. And then one year we hired on the day contract 3 professional soccer players to come to the sales kickoff, and we won. We destroyed Germany, France, etc. Now, our sales leader was really happy about that. But I was like, really? Was that the purpose? Was that the outcome you were seeking? You can't buy. And then, of course, Germany hated us, and everybody hated us for the entire trip and said we cheated. And kind of we did. But you can't buy those soccer players in your agile implementation. You have to bring in people to help you go through this process, I think, and I'm not sure that companies want to hear that.
Thank you. Well, this is a great. I know it was a compound question, and you unpacked it well. Thank you for this. So we got 3 minutes in the clock. I know we have a hard stop. You have an important meeting right after this, Dave. Folks, we got 3 minutes remaining, and those of you that haven't spoken yet, I would explicitly ask those that haven't asked a question, if you would like to come forward and either ask something. We got 2 minutes now, or if not, we will start wrapping this up. Mauro, you have a hand raised, so let's time box. 20 seconds, go.
Okay. All right, let's look at the future. What do you think, Dave, are some of the skills that we should be looking to learn as product owners, managers, strategists, whatever we do? What is the next edge for us?
Single most important skill is to be able to build hypotheses, build and clearly articulate it and clearly measure it. The ability to describe outcomes, to measure, to define hypothesis, to understand the relationship between hypothesis, basically the ability to do hypothesis-driven development and to deliver in that fashion, and to take advantage of data. Those things are the most important skills. I'm coming at it from a product perspective, from a product owner perspective, but they're the skills that I often lack, that I'm not good enough at in my dual role. I find that I get a good vision sometimes, and then I like crazy ass move towards it without really understanding what are those tests, what are those indicators, what are those signals that I need to start testing for on the way. And I think if I was going to start all this again, and I'm what, am I 54, so I've only got a few more years left, not to die, I hope. I mean to retire and to do other things and to teach and to, I don't know, maybe become an actor or something, I don't know, but my second career or whatever. But if I was starting again and really emphasizing, those skills, how do I build a hypothesis? How do I create small questions that I can test that allow me then to reform my direction? How do I do that empirically? That's hard, and I'm not sure I'm very good at it. Anyway, that's my take from without really preparing for that question, Maura.
Thank you for the insight and a sneak peek into the Scrum.org's motto. Thank you for the question too, Maru. Folks, we're at the time. We are at the time now, and we would have to wrap up hard. It's a hard stop now because Dave has a hard stop. So before we go, I would like to thank everyone for joining, and Dave.
Thank you for inviting.
Yeah, it's very humbly. Thank you very much for coming and entertaining this crowd and sharing your wisdom. And hopefully we maybe can have you back at some point in the nearby future. This recording, please give it some time, folks. I would like to have it successfully recorded, and then I'll hopefully share it with everyone. So once again, thank you, Dave. Thanks again. Let's go on with our day, and happy Friday, and have a good weekend.
Happy Friday, everybody. Take care. Thanks for taking the time. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Cheers. Bye.
Bye-bye.